Cameron Crowe and Burke Hulsman here. We're going to talk about Burke's Coal Valley experience. But if this is your first Coal Valley interview you've seen, or if it's not, it's always the same. We're doing an introduction so you know what we're talking about. So I wrote a blog post almost exactly 2 months ago. That's weird. It's so much has happened in 2 months. But I was reflecting on I'm going to close something that so I don't hear any more notifications. All right. I was reflecting on my time at Coal Valley because I had a realization last year that basically if there was anything that I felt strongly about, I needed to write about it because there could be somebody out there that it would mean something to, and maybe it would mean all the difference for them. Who knows? But I have felt so thankful when I read somebody else's honest opinions online, so I decided to do that, and this was one of the top things. So I talked about how when I left Coal Valley, I loved it, and then as the years went on and my worldview shifted, I looked back and I thought it was really messed up. And I wrote about it in detail, and I thought it would be a kind of a small scandal within this Coal Valley world, but within a week it would have blown over and nothing more would come of it. But it exploded, and after several dozen, basically I probably talked to like 100 people within the first week of responses, like half of them pro, half of them con. And after so many people were like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. Here's my story. And they were almost all worse than mine. I was like, there needs to be a better place to kind of talk about this. So we created a support group for kind of people to share privately. And then there is now a website, coalvalleyspeaks.com, is for all the kind of people that want to share publicly, for people outside the support group, because I screen that to make sure there aren't any haters in there. And then we actually came together and brought our stories together and turned it into here's what we think the problems at Coal Valley were, here's what our stories were in themes, and here's what we think could be good solutions to improve those, with the goal of making it a safe and healthy place for any kid to grow up, no matter if they're straight or not, a boy or a girl. There's like lots of groups that are not being treated in a healthy way as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of other people. Anyway, that's the context, and Burke was gracious enough to tell us kind of his take on all this. So Burke, yeah, when did you get exposed to this stuff, and what went through your head?
In just making sure you're specifically, what kind of stuff are we talking?
This call, like whether it was my blog post or an interview or this kind of more recent stuff.
If I recall, I probably saw your blog post the day after you published it, and as I mentioned to you earlier, just a friend of mine and we were talking about it, and we watched everything kind of unfold, and just the amount that it exploded was something that we had been wanting to see for quite some time, and this has just been a great avalanche, and we really do hope that it causes a positive change for the school, because that's one of the things that ever since we graduated, it's been 6 years already for us, and time's just flown by.
Yep.
But we have discussed that at length sometime, and we're not obsessed about it, but we do talk about our experience and just how, if we were to ever send our kids to a place like that, would we send it to Coal Valley? And resoundingly, we both have decided no, we wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot to that, especially for someone like me, where when I went to Coal Valley, I went there in the 7th grade. I had transferred from public school. And about the age of 12, when my last year in public school, I really started taking my faith seriously. It was kind of that moment where I started making my parents' faith my own faith. And I was one of those kids where when I started taking it seriously, there were people at the elementary school that I went to that teased me a little bit, made fun of me for it. And so when we were looking for high school / junior highs to send me to, Cole Valley just seemed natural. I had a friend who was already going there. He said he loved it. He eventually left before I did. I graduated from Cole Valley, but it seemed like it was the ideal place for me. And I honestly remember those first couple of years, I was just enamored with what it stood for. And I did my best to see. I'm trying to decide how to word it. But based on their mission statement, I just wanted to follow what they put aside. And I wanted to be a leader within Cole Valley for my whole time of being there. And in some cases I was, and in some cases the administration itself rebuffed me. And as we got closer and closer to those, especially those last 2 years of my experience there, I finally realized that I just wasn't what they were looking for. I wasn't their brand of perfection or holiness or whatever. And so that kind of led to this disenfranchisement, I guess. I don't know. I think that's the word I'm looking for there. And eventually, I currently still have faith, but for that first couple of years after Cole Valley, I very much did not like God. I did not like Jesus Christ. I did not like the idea of church, religion, any of it. And so it took a little bit of wandering for me to finally come back to it. And I'm grateful that I've found my own way of coming to terms with that while still being willing to listen to other people's opinions and things.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think college was a good experience for me in general.
Where'd you go to college?
I started off at the College of Idaho and eventually transferred over to Boise State.
Go Broncos.
In the Broncos.
You mentioned you wanted to be a leader at Cole Valley. What do you mean by that? And you wanted to be a leader, and you didn't feel like the administration wanted you to be a leader. Like, what do you mean?
So it felt like from the very young age we started at as soon as we get to the junior high campus and high school campus, it felt like they were constantly telling us, you need to be examples, you need to be ambassadors for Christ. All of these things were constantly pounded in our head, and that was at a time where I took it very seriously. So I thought, yeah, I do. I want that. And that made me strive to do things that in my head made me seem like I was shining Christ's light to other people. And looking back, I probably came across as honestly a douchebag.
What do you think what are those things? Can you give me specifics?
So one of the things I did, and I do remember a few teachers giving me some praise for this. In my 8th grade year, I volunteered to speak at chapel. I went to Mr. Bond and asked him if I could speak. And I had taken a sermon from a church camp a couple years ago at that point to heart. And I wanted to share that. And so I asked, may I speak in chapel? Which I did. And it was my first time ever truly public speaking. And I thought I rocked it. And I had a few teachers who honestly just admired me for my courage to do that. And I'm not trying to glorify myself here because it was just something I wanted to do. And because of that sort of mission statement that they had for us. Besides that, I was an active member of the worship team pretty much from 8th grade until my senior year. I probably took a moment. I took half a year off because of something we'll discuss at a later point. But I did that. I ran.
Well, but these don't seem like things that make you seem like a douchebag to me.
I know, but the air I might have had about it, just reflecting on it, there were
just like holier than thou, or like
there were moments, especially because I didn't struggle until ninth grade, and ninth grade was probably when I struggle with depression, and that's kind of when I realized that. But so my first couple of years at Cole, I didn't struggle with anything truly. So I probably came across as a holier than thou figure to some people. And then later on, I ran for chaplain. I think the last 3 chances I could, if I recall, you could run. I don't even remember. I think it was 10th grade, junior year, senior year, you could run for chaplain. And I did all 3 of those, I think. So I never won any of them, which, whatever. I think that's probably for the best at this point.
But it sounds like these other things, you were saying you wanted to be a leader and the administration didn't want you to, but it sounded like you got to speak at chapel, you got to be on the worship team. Like, sounded like you were getting the opportunities.
Yeah. But there was no advancement. So the thing I always wanted to do, in church, I've always been a bit of a worshiper. I've always loved worship. It's when I feel the closest to God. And I always wanted to be the actual team leader at some point. And I felt like anytime I wanted to do that, I was rebuffed from that. And later on, I look back and it's okay for the reasons that they did, because I don't quite have the talent on the guitar or on a piano that I wish I did, because most worship leaders, they were fluent, quote unquote, in both singing and guitar playing. But there was one year where they had 2 worship leaders. Brandon Arthur was one of them, if I recall. But he was just a singer, and he led his own worship team. So I thought, well, since they're doing that, maybe after this I can try and do the same thing. And it just felt like they just told me no.
So you said that they kind of had their own picture of like what they wanted somebody to be that was going to be a leader. What was that? What do you think that was? What's the kind of person that it's acceptable to promote?
I'm trying to think exactly, because there's one student in particular, and I'm not going to use his name, but he strikes me as basically what they wanted to be. Very, very learned in the Bible, basically no scandals to his name. Nothing that would cause him to be undesirable. And this can go for a
it's like they're like a verse, like the blemishless sheep or something like that.
Exactly. Something like that. And yeah, no, when asked that question, what I think of, I literally think of just one student, and I'm not going to name him, but.
So what this student, like, they didn't have any marks against them. Were they an athlete? Were they popular?
They were an athlete. He was semi-popular. I made it a point to myself that when I went to Cole Valley, I never wanted to follow in with the popular kids. I'm kind of a big nerd about everything, so I just determined when I went there I didn't want to be like that. And so I didn't fall in with that crowd, and I'm okay with that, and I don't blame people who did fall in with that crowd, because for some people it's what they like, and I didn't like it.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the disillusionment or disenfranchisement, like that started after you left or toward in the last years. When did that begin?
So it started kind of junior year was where it really started to take hold. My sophomore year was particularly hard, just because that depression I mentioned was really bad that year. I kind of got it a little bit under control for the last 2 years, and I was able to kind of keep myself in the right mindset, I guess. I don't know, because...
How did you do that? How did you cope with your depression?
I truly can't tell you, because now looking back and knowing that's what it was. And I don't blame any of my friends at the time. We're all kids. We're still all trying to figure ourselves out. And I don't blame any of my friends for not knowing what to do with me in those times, because it's hard. It is so hard when you realize that you do have that. And
Well,
all I
kids
can
don't know kids don't really know much.
exactly. And like now I know, and now like I'm not ashamed to say like, oh, maybe I need antidepressants or maybe I need counseling. Obviously, the counseling at Cole Valley was not ideal. And
Was there a counselor there?
Yeah, Mrs. Davidson was still the counselor up until my final year, and she uh, not the in nice woman, but I just felt like she didn't help.
Was it qualified?
I want to say that, yeah, but I don't want to.
Did she have a license or like certifications or like all the,
knowledge, but I did only meet with her a couple of times in regards to this situation in these feelings I was having. And just based on how those meetings went, I honestly didn't pursue speaking with her much after that.
So you felt, it sounds like, you were having a really hard time and nobody really noticed, or at least, maybe you talked to the counselor at one time, but then there wasn't any kind of like,
Exactly.
here are the next steps.
And basically what happened is that I wasn't afraid to talk to my friends about it. My particular group of friends, I was probably too open, and sometimes that kind of pushed them away in some cases. And I mean, some of the people I'm talking about, they aren't my close friends anymore. They're more acquaintances or just people I've fallen out of contact with.
Mm-hmm.
But they were part of the reason I even went to her in the first place, is because I think that they got to a point where they couldn't help me. And like I said, I don't blame them for that. We're kids. We don't know what the heck we're doing. But then basically I went to her, was not satisfied with what was being told to me or how to handle these feelings, that I basically just kept them to myself. And for some reason that worked for me. For some reason that honestly worked for me for a little bit of time. I could still talk to my parents. They didn't fully understand everything,
Mm-hmm.
but they did their best.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you had a tough sophomore year, and then junior year you started to kind of,
so
your rose-colored glasses for Cole Valley were starting.
Here. So I'll continue that line of thought. Basically, sophomore year was when I really started doubting whether or not God could love me with all my mistakes. And maybe part of that came with some of the rejection I was feeling from, I'm trying to be a leader. I know I'm not perfect, but I still want to be somebody who's shining Christ's light. And so sophomore year, I really began questioning the whole faith thing, God, all that stuff. And the people around me that I would try and talk about that with weren't exactly people who would give me the best answers. I'm not going to name this teacher because I do respect him, but he has very Calvinistic beliefs where if you are questioning, then you are doomed. You're one of the people who is predestined for the fires, basically. And I didn't need to be told that, because then it's like, well, then why am I even trying? Because if I'm already predestined for this, then why am I even bothering to ask whether or not I should love God or worship God? And those were kind of the thoughts I was feeling.
So you felt like kind of questioning wasn't okay.
Exactly. And that was a big thing sophomore and junior year, where the questioning wasn't exactly the way I wanted to go, but it would still happen. no matter what I did, whether I was trying to suppress it or whether I was actively pursuing it.
Yeah.
Either way, it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So as we get into junior year, I just start seeing certain things from the teaching staff and the administrative staff that just make me question their motives as well, even more so.
What do you mean by that? Their motives?
Whether or not they actually cared about us, or if this was just a big money-making scam or something where they were just putting us out there and kind of letting some of us fail because they don't like us. Not going to name this particular teacher, but this one, and I wasn't even in the class that had to, but it was kind of an example of their behavior that I think is unacceptable, especially for kids. So this was our junior year, and this particular teacher was giving a test, and a bit of a troublemaker student put the answers on the podium that this teacher was sitting behind, unbeknownst to them. And eventually, some people were giggling a little bit, and they asked, well, what's going on? And it's discovered that the entire front row, like right here, has been having the answers the entire time, whereas my friend, he's sitting all the way in the back. He's very studious, very attentive. He's not even paying attention to what anybody else is doing. He's just wanting to get the test done. And this teacher throws a fit and says the entire class gets an F. The entire class gets an F. She starts throwing books around, basically has a full-on temper tantrum. By the time my class comes in afterward, she's just completely distraught, and we basically don't get anything accomplished for that day because she had this fit and she needed to go and think about proper punishment now. But it just seemed it's that classic case of punish the whole for the actions of a few. And
yeah, it seems like a big overreaction, but did anybody, report this? Like, what was there any fallout, or like how did people respond?
Not that I'm aware of. I just know that it happened, and I'm only telling that from my friend's perspective at that point. I have my own issues with this particular teacher. I'm a very literal person. Until I understand somebody's being sarcastic with me, I take most of what is being said at face value. And this particular teacher was very sarcastic with me. And
Like what did she say?
There were just so many times where I would go and ask for clarification on assignments. And I can't give you the exact example. I just remember her responding in such a sarcastic way that I would eventually just have to keep coming back and asking again and again, give me a clear answer so that I can do this and so that I can get a good grade. And it frustrated me. And one of the things I truly tried, like, I'm one of those people who, until you're a teacher that has truly like burned me in a way that I really don't care about impressing you, I'm going to try my best for you. And truly I did for the entire year that particular teacher was my teacher. And I never tried to do anything wrong. And she was one of those that would let her favorite students text in her class and get away with it. She'd catch them and she'd just let them off the hook. And I just thought in my head, when that happened, I said, if I did the same thing, you would have, sent me to the office. You would have taken my phone away. You would have done something.
Was this just one bad teacher, or did you kind of see, like,
There was a couple more. That one in particular. This is like I said, this is kind of junior year moving into senior year. Like those last 2 years were where I really kind of fell out of thinking that the teachers and the administration had the best interest for everyone. Because it did get so bad at one point that my parents did go in to meet with this teacher and I believe Molman and Demain. And the only thing that they've truly told me about that is that I was the one painted as the problem. And that frustrated my parents. Not because they don't believe that, I'm capable of doing something wrong, but just because it felt like the conversation was just cut off at your son's the problem, not her. He needs to learn how to yada, yada, yada. And parents told me, but they just told me how gag worthy it was for them that they get into this meeting and before they even start, Molman and Demain and the gal want to sit them down and have them pray over this meeting. And my parents are business people. They know how to discipline their employees. They also know when too much discipline is being used. And that just felt like one of those moments where, no, we don't need to pray about this. Let's just have a talk about this and let's get to the bottom of this and be done with it.
Yeah. Seems like this is the classic way I feel like they handle anything uncomfortable. It's like, we'll just pray about it and that'll be most of the solution. And if anything, then we'll kind of take the heat off of us. And that's supposed to be, it's like a smoke screen, and we're praying about it.
Exactly. And I don't hate the idea of prayer, but in those moments, I agree with my parents on that. Let's talk about the problem. Let's talk about this real thing that's happening between a student and a teacher, and let's figure out how we make sure it doesn't happen anymore. And if that means you have to treat them a little bit differently, then so be it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as, and I'm not saying I'm on the spectrum, but it's the same thing as if you're dealing with an autistic person and they're not going to understand all the social things there. They're not going to understand that the teacher's being sarcastic with them.
Yeah.
You wouldn't talk to an autistic person that way, so why are you talking to somebody who's not on the spectrum that way?
Yeah.
So,
do you think, imagine that, Molman and Demain and folks, watch this interview. Will they just be like, well, Burke was always a problem child or something like that? Will they try to brush it aside like that, or?
They might. And that's the other main reason that, it's taken me so long to kind of gather my thoughts and talk about this, because I don't know. I don't know what people's perceptions of me were. And at this point, I don't care. I'm talking about it from my perspective. I need to get it off my chest.
Do you feel like that's how it used to be? Sweep things aside because, well, it's Burke.
I don't feel like that was the case. I truly think that sophomore year onward, it kind of became that case for me, except for another incident, which we'll get to. And it's kind of the big one, is kind of the reason I wanted to even talk about this, because it was my breaking point, but we'll get there. But no, I don't feel like I was a problem. There were certain teachers where they were basically on that list of, you've been burned. You've burned me too bad, so I don't care about respecting you the same way. I'll still be cordial with you, but I'm going to get the work done and I'm out of here. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
There was one teacher in particular that I did that to, and she never did anything like that to me. So I don't consider, as much as I didn't like her, I don't consider that something where it's like, oh yeah, I'm still holding a grudge about that.
Yeah.
So I may have been a problem to her, but I think we both just kind of went our separate ways.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you had a big thing happen. Tell me about it.
So we get into senior year, and here's kind of how it went. And I feel like my depression kind of went in waves where, if I'm being completely honest, 8th grade was the first time I suffered from it. And then it would come back again in 10th grade. And it seemed like it was every even year I would just have what I thought was the worst year of my life. So we go into senior year, and I say, I'm going to break that habit. I'm going to have the best year of my life. I don't care. It's my last year of high school. Let's be done. And for the most part, I did. I made it as good as I possibly could. And I did more that year than I had ever done. I did cross country. I did a little bit of track, but eventually that kind of fell to the side because acting and choir kind of took up more of my time towards the end of the year rather than the beginning. And so with that, choir we did with Sutherland as the teacher there. Still love her. But we had a couple of the seniors, upperclassmen, try out for something called All Northwest Honor Choir, which bunch of choirs from around the Northwest, they try out and they send some of their best students there. And if you get accepted, it's very prestigious. And so for the heck of it, I think about 10 of us auditioned, and we send off our stuff, and we were supposed to hear back within the month. Something happened where us hearing back didn't happen until January, and the actual honor choir meetup is in February, March area. And we didn't hear back, and apparently 2 of us had made it, and we had auditioned in October. So we only have like a month to crunch this out, and the other gal who made it in just couldn't make it work, and I decided to make it work. So for that last month before it happened, I would take time out of my day to go and meet up with Sutherland and practice this music, and it was hard music. I was killing my voice for a time there because I was not only learning that, but I was learning the stuff we would have to do for our music festival the next month after. And so with that, I was trying to be as responsible as possible. So I would go to my other teachers and just say, hey, I have this coming up in like 2 or 3 weeks. If it's possible, can you please let me get a glimpse into lesson plans, homework, just so I can make sure that I'm caught up for you. And I don't want to fall behind. I want to make sure I'm caught up in all my classes, blah, blah, blah. And so most of them obliged me on that. And I was doing that whenever I could, making sure I was always caught up on everything. Now, choir and acting were back-to-back periods. Acting came right after choir. And as soon as choir was over, the acting teacher wanted to start immediately. And since choir and acting are both things I'm very passionate about, sorry, let me get my thoughts straight here. I took them both just very seriously. And the teacher had asked that we make sure we knew all of our lines by, I think, November was when he wanted us to know them. And so just being me, I made sure I was completely off book by November. And we moved on forward, and we were just kind of getting ready. I know, and I'm not blaming any of the other kids. Some of them, it wasn't their passion as much as it was mine. But some of them weren't off book until some of them were still looking at their lines the week before we debuted the play. But he took me aside one time, and he told me basically, I appreciate that you work so hard and blah, blah, blah. And so then there was one day about a week or 2 before I was going to head to All Northwest, and we get into acting class, and he says, here's the scenes we're going to work on. None of the scenes that he said were anything I was involved in. So I said, okay, I'm going to take this time just to go study, do some extra homework while I have the chance. And so I went and found one of my other friends who it was a prep period for them, and the teacher didn't need them to help with that. So we were just doing our math homework together for a little bit. And the next thing I know, somebody comes running up to find me, yelling that, where have you been? We're running the whole play right now. And I said, we were only running these scenes. What happened? Just basically he changed his mind in the middle of that. And so I come back and I just get through it. And, he pulls me aside afterward and he says, the administration has recommended that I give you a detention. And that
administration.
With this day, I can't tell if he was lying or something, and we'll get into why in just a second. But that came as a shock to me because that was my first detention ever. Like I said, I'm not a rule breaker. I would push the bounds on some things, but I wasn't like that. And so I think that was a Thursday. So I go home and I just kind of talk with my parents about it. And I said, oh, well, I've been giving a detention for this, and I don't think it's fair. He says it was the administration's idea, yada, yada. And my parents say, well, you're 18 now. Plead your case, write a letter. Well, first they told me, calm down a little bit, get the anger out, and then write a letter. Write him a letter and just plead your case as to why this is unfair. And so I did. And just to be sure, just to make sure I wasn't writing anything that was offensive or lashing out in anger, I made sure a couple of the other teachers that I really trusted read it over, and I just said, hey, I'm just going to give this to the drama teacher. Do you think that anything in here needs to be changed? And all of them gave me a thumbs up. Looks good. So Friday afternoon, we go in, and I'm just there right on. I don't leave. I don't try to leave at all. I'm just there to focus because I don't want to get in any more trouble about it, and I don't want to cause him any more stress than I already have, because it didn't seem like he was angry at me the day before. It seemed like truly it was the administration's idea to give me this detention. So I give him the letter, and we exit for the day. It's the weekend. So I go home. I go take care of all my stuff. Come back on Monday, and same thing. I'm just right there, right front and center. What are we doing today, boss? What's the plan today? And, he goes through. And then before he dismisses everybody to go do whatever they're doing, he does this in front of the entire class. He turns to me and he says, that letter was ridiculous. You still have the detention, and you and I are gonna go have a talk in the conference room. So then he takes me aside after he's basically embarrassed me in front of all my peers. Then he takes me into the office and he reads the letter line by line and tells me how everything I said was wrong. Every single thing I said was wrong. And being the emotional person I am, at this point, I can't even keep together. I'm crying. I'm bawling my eyes out because I respected this guy. I really did. I respected him a lot. And then he basically chews me out in front of my peers and then to my face.
Oh, this wasn't the private talk? This was still in front of the whole class?
No. The ripping apart the letter piece by piece that was private, at least. I will give him that. It was private. But when I cry, people know about it for an hour after the fact. I get so splotchy and red. So it's like, at this point, people know that whatever happens in that room has me distraught, has me completely distraught. So then he's finished with that, and he sends me to Molman. And I sit down with Mr. Molman for a little bit. And he just basically gives me the same spiel that the drama teacher had just given me. And I just tried to explain my situation. I have this extremely prestigious thing coming up that the administration should be proud of me for even being a part of, but you don't care because all you care about is sports. You don't care about the arts. You don't care about the acting program. You don't care about music. You don't. And so he gives me a small bit of leeway. He says I don't have to serve detention after school. I have to serve it before school because I'm usually always there an hour early anyway. But he says, okay, you can come in to serve your detention before school instead of after school. And normally letting anything to read or work on, but here's what I'll do for you, Burke. Here's what I'll do for you. You can bring your Bible. You can bring your Bible and you can read that the entire time you're in detention. And I felt slapped across the face 3 times in a row. And I already kind of disliked Molman, but that sealed it for me. That really sealed it, and the way that whole situation was handled sealed it for me. And my parents wanted to go ballistic.
How did you process that? Like, what did it mean to you that he did that?
It goes back to that whole leadership thing. I had been trying my best to be an adult. This is my senior year. You want us to go out into the world and be adults. And when I tried to be an adult, when I tried to plead my case as to why this is unfair, you smacked me down. And then as a consolation prize, you gave me a Bible. And that pissed me off. The amount of anger I felt about that still gets me so heated today. And I actually told this story to, I'm a bartender. I told this story to a patron I had because him and I were just sitting there for a few hours after I closed, just talking about life. And I told him about this. I don't know what led to this, but I started crying in the middle of me telling him this. This was only like a month ago.
Wow.
And just the amount of anger I still feel about this. And it's part of the reason that I'm happy about this movement right now, because I don't want to see any other kids who are like me who want to step up to be leaders, whether it be for Christ or for this next generation of people who need to take over this country and the world. You shouldn't discourage them from wanting to step up.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it just still makes me angry.
Yeah.
To this day.
Well, you've been trying so hard and dedicating yourself so much, and it was such a big thing. And then they were, out of nowhere, seeming totally uncharacteristic. You kind of got screwed, and you're like, what the hell? And they're like, no, like just sit down and shut up and read your Bible like a good boy.
Like a good little Christian boy. Don't question authority.
Yeah, the questioning authority. Can you hear me? I think I'm having an internet.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
I can still hear you. Yeah, internet was being a little weird there.
Do you think this questioning? So we talked about like you can't question your faith, or like And then we also talked about you can't question authority. Like, are those connected at all?
In my head, I would say so. And yeah, no, I think that those are very much connected because, like I said, I come to Coal Valley after going through a little bit of a hectic time my last year at public school, and I come to where all of these teachers are supposed to be sharing the same faith as I am, and yet they act almost as insecure and childish as us. And in that moment, that the big detention moment, that's when I realized that even though these people claim to follow the same God as I do, they're squash children too. That drove me nuts because you expect your elders, your adults, to be better than you.
Yeah.
And to have more wisdom than you, especially when you're raised in a faith background like that.
Do you think that teachers and administration, like, this immaturity or, lashing out, for not good reason, just kind of being, immature kind of, is that because they lack training or like certification?
On the teachers that I'm actively thinking of, yes. Obviously, not every teacher was like that. There are still teachers to this day that are working there right now that I still adore, that I still respect very much. But with some of these ones that I'm thinking of particularly, absolutely, I don't think that they should have been teachers.
And it sounds like you would be punished for reporting dissatisfaction, or like they're not being fair, they're overreacting, whatever. Like
they would rather defend the teacher than the student in those cases. And that, I'm okay if you just come at it at a level point. Guilty until proven innocent for both of them.
Yeah.
Or innocent until sorry.
Oops. Until proven guilty. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that's just the way it should be come across, and you should be willing to have the hard talk to make sure that both parties aren't in the wrong, and if one of them is, then dole out the punishment.
Yeah.
But so on top of that, so that was the big incident for senior year. But other than that, I pushed the line a little bit more. So instead of keeping the questions I had to myself, we would actively try and put some questions in to try and subvert what was being taught. Because so here's the thing. There was a Bible teacher right after Mr. Bond left, who his worldviews class, I had always heard good things about worldviews class. I've heard a couple of different testimonies now since then that maybe it wasn't quite as good as it should have been, but I had always been honestly excited to take it from Mr. Bond. And so then the Bonds left, and then this new guy comes in, and he starts teaching us. And I wouldn't even say he taught us. He made us watch videos. It was called the Truth Project, and it was by Del Tackett. And he would bring us in every week, and we'd watch another episode of the Truth Project. And it was all about talking about how Jesus is the truth, and how do you define your own truth in your life, and things like that. And it was just, the way I looked at it is it was the same exact thing as Bond's Fundamentals of Faith class. So, and which I had already taken my junior year. So we get into senior year, and I'm basically given the exact same information I already learned the year prior. So what was the point? So then to try and liven up the discussions, me and a couple of my friends in that class, we'd try and ask hard questions. We'd try and ask, well, kind of subversive of the thought. I'm trying to remember an exact one that we talked about.
You trying to trap him?
Not necessarily trap them, but we were trying to get people to think about something other than just the things you've been force-fed your entire life. Think about it a little differently. This isn't even like, this isn't controversial stuff, but just like think of it some other way. Why is it so hard to think of outside the box, even within your own faith?
Well, what was the class? It was worldviews?
So it was worldviews.
So that's like probably what you're supposed to be doing in that class,
exactly.
Right?
And that was the thing is, so I like I said, I've read some of the testimonies or watched interviews of people who talked about how the worldviews class, when it would go to other religions, it would just basically make fun of them. I taken over not even mentioning the other religions at all. We literally didn't talk about any other belief system besides Christianity at all in a worldviews class. Not to say I would have agreed with it if we just covered Mormonism and just said, oh, well, they're wrong, we're right. I wouldn't have necessarily agreed with that, but that might have been better than no mention of Mormonism at all.
Right.
So
do you think that, like, you'd think that the administration would have some concerns about that, basically, like, you know, not following curriculum at all? Like, are there quality controls on that stuff from, like, what you're...
Supposedly is. I mean, you don't... Every year I remember Domain coming in and, you know, sitting in on almost every teacher's class at some point just to listen in, and most of them, I never really felt like any of them got nervous, like their job was in jeopardy. And so it didn't feel like it felt like there was their quality control on their end, but I guess it wasn't as up to standard as I was hoping.
Yeah.
And so it just frustrates me that I, looking back, I went there for this Christian education. And when I really am honest with myself, the only thing I truly got out of it was a piece of paper and some good friends that I still have to this day, thank goodness. But the education wasn't much better than it probably would have been anywhere else.
And you made your parents' bank account a lot smaller.
Exactly. And yeah.
Not you did, you know, they did, but yeah.
No, I know, but it was their choice, and they did ask me my junior year if I wanted to go somewhere else. And to their surprise or horror, I don't really know which, but I continued to stay, and I couldn't answer you honestly whether or not it was at that point in time because of just my friends or because I still believed in Coal Valley.
Did your parents, it sounds like your parents were not happy about the way some of these things were handled. Were they as kind of disappointed in Coal Valley as you were at that point?
So here was what I was going to say. So after the incident with the drama teacher, my parents were done. That was their breaking point. They were ready to rain fire, and my parents aren't normally people you want to screw with. They really aren't. They will do anything to protect their baby boy. And I mean, I appreciate them because they would fight the battles that I couldn't. And basically what happened was they were ready to go in and have a full-on meeting with Carr, with Molman, with the drama teacher, and just say, you know what? No, this isn't right. This was a horrible way of doling out justice. And what saved that from happening, and I know, like, really, I look at it as I saved them from this, because it would have been bad. There would have been massive fallout. And
What do you think would have happened?
I don't know. I probably either would have been asked to never come back. They would have been asked never to come back. Something along those lines. I don't know how they would have reacted to this. But what saved that from happening was I basically told them it's not worth it, because something happened for the drama teacher. One of his children fell almost to the point of death, ill. And I told my parents, I want to be better than him. I'm not going to be kicking him while he's down, because he did that to me, but I will not do the same to him. And so I told them just to drop it. I'll serve the detention, and let's just move on. But they were not upset, and my mom actually sent me an email that she never ended, but I always wondered what it said, and she sent it to me, and the words she had to say were scathing. If you want me to share any excerpts from that, I will. I did have that prepared just in case, but
You can if you want to. I think it'd help.
yeah, for sure. Dear Mr. Carr and Mr. Molman, she writes, it is with heavy heart that I write this letter to let you know how disappointed I am in what is happening at the school. My son will be serving his detention tomorrow morning. The only reason that I am letting him do so is because I fear that if I refuse to let him serve his detention, another miscarriage of justice might occur. And we don't want any more punishment heavy-handedly handed out for no good reason. But I reserve the right to demand an audience with yourselves and your dynamite teaching staff of teacher. I am appalled at how this situation was handled. When my son came home and explained what happened, he had learned all his lines. He wasn't part of the practice that was happening. He was out in the hall doing homework for another class, and teacher got upset and was chastising him for what he had done, stating that the administration wanted to give Burke a detention, even though he didn't really want to. The teacher had said in the statement to me that he didn't want to, but the administration had told him to. They appeared to talk it out, smooth it over, and Burke agreed not to do it again, go out and do homework during class. The next day he was given a detention. When he brought it home to us, we said, okay, it's within his rights, but it's time to act like an adult. So try to have a logical conversation with the teacher about it and try to get it sorted out. We advised him to write teacher a letter stating his case, apologizing and trying to explain why he had done what he did and why he didn't think he should be given the detention. Burke wrote the letter. It was well written and not in the least bit offensive. When teacher read the letter, he then loudly in front of the class, said loudly in front of the class that the letter was ridiculous and you still have detention. After class, he proceeded to dress Burke down, going through the letter bit by bit and tearing it apart. When Burke talked to Mr. Molman about it, Mr. Molman told Burke that he needed to learn to submit to authority, further browbeating him and saying, you can bring your Bible to detention. Okay, let's start with all the things that were mishandled in this situation. First, my husband and I are business owners, and we have been for 14 years. It is positively disrespectful to ever say something to a person in front of their peers. Teacher should have never said what he said in front of the whole class. Next, we told Burke to write the letter, be an adult, try to be factual and calm, and say what he had to say without getting mad. When teacher told Burke the letter was ridiculous, he basically told Burke his parents were ridiculous. When he tore apart the letter because he didn't like to be challenged by a student who was being responsible and fair, he showed that what those in power oftentimes do. They stomp people. And the tip of the iceberg, when the vice principal tells you after you've been chewed out for basically standing up for yourself that you need to learn to submit to authority, that is a slap in the face. We did not spend the last 18 years teaching our son to submit to an authority that just wants to shut you up because you had the audacity to plead your case. These children aren't 12 anymore. They aren't 8 anymore. They deserve the right to be at least spoken to like they are human beings. I wouldn't have dared said the things that teachers said to my son, to any of my employees, because it would have been disrespectful and unbecoming of a person in a leadership position. And I'm pausing just for a moment. Internet was saying it might be.
It was a little choppy, but I think we're good.
Cool. Burke isn't a hoodlum. He isn't a trouble causer. I'm not pretending for a second that he is an angel. And even with that, if he needs to be punished, so be it. But I am taken aback by the way things seem to have been handled in the process. This isn't the first time we've had an issue with the teacher. She kind of goes on and on about what happened with the other teacher. We love the idea of Cole, but when problems arise and we try to rationally work through things, we are met with irrationality, threats, and behavior I'm pretty sure it doesn't go with your own mission statement.
Dang.
We know what it's like to be the people in charge. We know that with great power comes great responsibility. Sometimes I think it would be better to stop and evaluate how we as people in charge have dealt with a situation instead of taking out our Bibles and beating our subordinates with it. So that's the gist of that. She had a couple closing things, but seriously, I wish she had sent it almost, because when I didn't get to read that until, and I almost said, I may not have wanted you to kick the other dude while he was down, but that would have sent a clear message to the administration. And in her closing line, she basically said, I hope we haven't wasted the last 7 or 8 years of Burke being a part of this school.
Damn. That email gave me chills. That was like,
it gave me chills the first time I read it.
Yeah. It feels so parallel to like everything we're talking about in Coal Valley Speaks, honestly. It's like, when we're saying something's not right and you just basically try to like ignore it, latch onto something totally different, or like just you be really immature about it and don't handle it like, rational.
Adults.
Yeah, exactly. Even my blog post, it's like, you know what? Of all the criticism I got, never once did anybody say those things weren't true. They just said, how dare you say something against us in public? You did it the wrong way. Like, I'm like, wait. So let me get this right. All of you that are livid at me because I have the audacity to criticize the organization, and that makes it a personal betrayal of everyone connected to it. But we're just going to ignore all the things I said because that doesn't matter.
Exactly. And that just seems to be a problem with society as a whole, not just Coal Valley, is if you criticize someone, it automatically means you hate them. Yeah. And that's just blatantly not the case. I hope all of the criticism that we're drawing towards the school helps it be better, helps it to be something that if I want my kids to go to a faith-based education school, I'll send them there. But right now, based on my memories of Coal Valley, I would choose Bishop Kelly over it any day if I wanted a faith-based education.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would that email would have been dynamite to send, but like, what if you've said all this stuff to me, but like, what would you want them to hear in particular? Like, if you had a message for the administration, what would it be?
Protect the kids, protect them, stop hurting them, whether they believe what you want them to believe or not. Let them question, and maybe they'll end up like me, where the questioning made their faith stronger. Don't kick them while they're down. Help them get through that hard time. If they're struggling with whether or not they're gay, lesbian, trans, whatever, help them. Don't kick them. Don't disregard them.
Yeah.
Because kids are our future, and if you shun them or you make them feel like crap, then crap is what our future is going to be. Because you're going to have all these people who weren't raised in a way that they can fend for themselves or have a reason for why they believe what they believe.
Yeah. What What would you want students to hear? Current students.
Current students, it gets better. And I'm sure that most people in these interviews have said that it gets better. Life gets better, and take it from somebody who has struggled with depression in the past. Find somebody who understands, find somebody who you can talk to, who you can trust. And if that is somebody at Cole Valley, then cherish that. And if that's somebody outside of Cole Valley, then cherish that. Don't feel like you need to be in this bubble and you can't go outside of it. Think outside the box. There was, in kind of that, there was one time about a year or two after Cole Valley, I remember I was waiting on these gals. They led a Bible study at my restaurant, and they asked if they could pray for me. And this was kind of when I was really not in the faith thing, but I said, sure, go ahead. One of them prayed over me, and the words she said made me know that I was okay where I was at in my questioning phase. She's hanging over me. She says, think outside the box. He will protect you. So if you're a person of faith and you're struggling with evolution or any of these other things, don't be afraid to ask questions about it.
Yeah.
Because if faith is true, then God's not going to disregard you because you had a couple of questions.
Yeah, if it's true, it doesn't matter how much questioning you do, it's still going to be true.
Exactly.
And so you got nothing to lose. There's nothing bad that can come from questioning. If anything, you'll be more likely to be confident that it's true if it's
exactly.
Okay, and message to prospective parents that are thinking about putting their kids in Cole Valley.
Basically the same message I already gave the administration. Protect your kids. Listen to them. If there's something that's going on, don't immediately throw them under the bus. Maybe something is actively going on, because you should be fighting tooth and nail to make sure that their education and eventually what they're going to be shaped into once they leave is what you would want for them.
Yep.
So if that means you have to take them out of Cole Valley, so be it. And if that means that you want to keep them in Cole Valley, so be it. But make sure you're taking care of your kids.
Any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
Unless you have any other questions for me, Cam.
I think you did a great job. You covered a lot of ground, so that's everything I had in mind.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot, and good luck rewatching Game of Thrones, getting ready for the new season. You got a lot of TV to watch.
Definitely.
Me too. I'm not going to get caught up in time though. I'm only on the end of season 2, so yeah. There's
goodness, you've got a ways.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, man. Talk to you later. Bye.